Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. And our first story today is about the laziest employee you've ever worked with. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Boss doesn't want my help unless she specifically asks for it. A few years ago, I took a customer service job, and my boss, Shirley, was the laziest, snarkiest person I've ever worked around. She spent her day on social media and personal calls while her inbox grew. Shirley's boss rarely came around and was happy as long as Shirley didn't bring any problems to her, so of course Shirley didn't. She buried any problems. After I'd been there a couple of weeks, Shirley was showing us some new procedure. I don't even remember what it was, but it was something I'd done in a previous position, and there was a much easier way of doing it. I asked if I could make a suggestion. Shirley instantly shot it down. No, I don't want suggestions or help unless I specifically ask for them. Just do what I tell you to do. It was embarrassing and demeaning to say the least. When Shirley went to lunch, the gal who'd been training me asked me what I was going to suggest, and I showed her. She agreed it was much more efficient and showed the others. She told me they just worked around Shirley. They all disliked her and just waited until she was away to discuss problems and came up with solutions and left Shirley out of it. A year later, the lady who trained me retired. Before she left, she showed me how to run phone statistic reports. They showed how many calls each rep took, how long the calls lasted, how many rings before each call was answered, typical call center stuff. She asked me to take over putting together a report including email statistics each month to send to the e-commerce manager. Shirley was to give me the email statistics. After the first month, I emailed Shirley asking for the email stats. She ignored it. After the second month, same thing. I decided if it wasn't important to her, then I just wouldn't do it. I figured if questioned, I would show the emails I sent Shirley, reminding her so my butt would be covered. Nothing ever came of it. So things went for the next couple of years. Then came the announcement that Shirley's boss had been fired, and while they searched for a replacement, Shirley would be reporting to the president of the company. She was terrified. He had her jumping through hoops. He had her submitting reports to him, attending meetings, answering questions. She returned from one meeting frantic. She told the senior rep, Angela, that he wanted her to bring him phone statistics that afternoon, and she had no idea where to get them. I knew. Angela knew I knew. While Shirley sat at her desk trying to figure what to do, Angela came to me and said, "You aren't going to tell her, right?" I said, "Well, she once told me she didn't want my help unless she specifically asked for it, right?" "Well, she hasn't specifically asked me." We grinned at each other. Shirley went to her meeting empty-handed. She ended up getting fired a week or so later. I don't think it was because she didn't have the phone statistics, but that was probably one of many things that made it apparent she didn't know what she was doing. And our second story. Army Revenge Story. A little background first. This story happened to my dad while he was in the Army shortly after Vietnam ended. My dad went to OCS, Officer Candidate School, and was a captain in an artillery unit. I've heard him throw around terms like 10th Mountain Division and Rangers a ton when I was growing up, and his uniforms say stuff like that. I'm an Army brat, but I never joined since it has no appeal to me. I don't know a ton about how things work in the Army, so I might get a few of the details wrong since I'm retelling the story based off what I remember him saying while growing up. My dad was a captain when this all happened at Fort Sill. Sorry to all you Army guys that will see something's off in my story. I don't know exactly how Army bureaucracy works. Joes would be trained by my dad's top sergeant that he nicknamed Top, and they were great friends up to the day Top died in the early 2000s. My dad and Top would show these guys how to fire artillery and do the math that comes into shooting the gun and how to stack ammo for it and do charge bags, etc. One thing you'll never do is stack rounds on the deck of the howitzer. A howitzer, from what I understand, is a giant gun capable of shooting something like 30 miles away. Not stacking the rounds on the deck was beaten into everyone's heads, and there was this one guy, we'll call him Timmy, that simply didn't care and would stack it on the deck anyways. One day they were firing off the howitzer and Timmy put some giant 8-inch rounds on the deck. When this gun is fired, I guess the whole deck and everything will jump and go back like 3 feet, which can cause these rounds to flip over and possibly detonate whatever is loaded into the heads of them like explosives, which is why you never do that. My dad sees this happen and sees Top jump down Timmy's throat about safety, etc., and Timmy is unfazed. Later that week, my dad gets a call from his superior saying they need to meet. My dad meets with his superior, and he says that Timmy has lodged a complaint against my dad and Top because they constantly single me out for their problems, or something to that degree. My dad's superior says he thinks the complaint got lost in the mail as he throws it in the trash. My dad said he got the hint that he needed to do something about Timmy since he was endangering everybody and now making written complaints that were downright lies. Instead of getting into a paper war to get Timmy discharged over safety violations, my dad decided good old-fashioned hazing would work better. Fast forward a few weeks, my dad and the Joes are in foxholes doing some type of war game in a huge Oklahoma field on base. It's pouring rain, and they're just sitting tight for a reason I can't remember. My dad calls Timmy over and says, "Timmy, you see that stop sign down the road, about 2 miles away?" Timmy says, "Yes, sir." My dad says, "Run down to it and report back if it's raining." Timmy runs down and back and says, "Sir, it's raining, sir." My dad says, "Very good, Timmy. Get back to your hole." Timmy makes a face of displeasure. My dad says, "Timmy, is there a problem?" Timmy says that there isn't, but that pisses my dad off for some reason, so he decides Timmy is lonely. My dad says, "Timmy, are you lonely in your foxhole? Do you need a companion?" Timmy says, "Sir, no, sir." And my dad says, "Bull crap, you look lonely." Dad then tells Timmy to find the biggest rock he can carry and report back immediately. Timmy comes back about 10 minutes later with a rock the size of a watermelon, and my dad says, "Out effing standing, Timmy! You found a friend! Go back to your hole with your new BFR!" Big effing rock. Timmy goes back to his foxhole and puts the rock down at his feet in the foxhole. Top goes over to where Timmy has a foxhole and says, "Timmy, you effing selfish a-hole," or something to that degree. "You didn't dig a foxhole for your BFR? Do you want your BFR to die?" Timmy says no and starts digging a second foxhole. Fast forward a few days, and they're back in the barracks, and Timmy has been dragging around his BFR the whole time, digging foxholes for it, carrying its ammo, etc. All the Joes have to fall in line in the morning, where my dad will look them over and tell them if something looks wrong, go over the war game results, or plan another one or something to that degree. Timmy shows up late, running with his BFR. Top goes over to Timmy and says, "Timmy, why are you in BFR late?" Timmy says he couldn't run as fast or something. My dad then comes over and says, "Timmy, this is unacceptable, and if I let you get away with this, then it'll set a bad example for the rest of the men." My dad then tells Timmy, "You and your BFR are getting too friendly, and you're missing roll call because of it. It's time for you to break up with your BFR and do a more important task." My dad instructs Timmy to go set his BFR free into the wild and come back with a push broom. Timmy runs over to a field about 200 yards away and sets the BFR down, then grabs a nearby broom and comes back. My dad says, "Top, do you see all this sunshine on the sidewalks?" Top says, "Yes, sir, I do. It's a damn shame." My dad looks at Timmy standing there with a new broom and says, "Timmy, today I need you to sweep all this GD sunshine off the sidewalks. Don't come out to the field until it's done." Timmy starts sweeping the sidewalks, and my dad and the rest of the men go out into the field to do training or something. Later that evening, about 10 hours later, they're coming back, and Timmy is pushing a block of wood on the sidewalk. He had swept so much that the bristles had worn off. It was dusk or close to it, and some of the sidewalk had a shadow from the nearby buildings cast on it. My dad says, "Timmy, outstanding work. Fall in." Timmy never lodged another complaint after that, and eventually got kicked out of the Army for sleeping on the lawn of the barracks from drinking. I guess 2 strikes for that, and you're done. At least back then. And our last story. Are you sure you want to play this game? Years ago, I worked for a family-run business. I usually worked 40-plus hours every week, and when my first check didn't reflect time and a half, I went to the accounting person who informed me that time and a half was not a benefit we offer. Okay, it's a federal law, but whatever. Fast forward months of working for the company, 40-plus hours a week. One day, I decided to test for a city job. No guarantee I'd get it, but it was a full-day test on a weekday. I had to ask for a day off. Keep in mind, I'd only used 1 vacation day until this point. Being honest, I told them what I needed it for, and that I wasn't even sure if I'd get the job. They granted the day, However, when I got back the day after, I was fired. I applied for unemployment as the firing was a surprise. Someone from the unemployment office called to tell me that my request was denied as my former employer stated I had received warnings. I had not. I replied, interesting, since I have an email from my manager from earlier the week I was fired saying what a great job I was doing and our customers loved me. And they don't pay time and a half overtime. Unemployment guy said he'd call me back. On callback, he advises he overrode the denial and I would be getting my unemployment and who I should call to file a complaint for the unpaid wages. Didn't think twice. Took all the copies of all my pay stubs and timesheets and filed the complaint. They launched the investigation and he was non-compliant with their request for a meeting. Got to the point that the investigator just showed up one day and walked into his office. They demanded his books, and every employee, past and present, for something like 7 years prior, got paid what they were owed, plus he had to pay a penalty. All while another company was in negotiations to merge with his. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.